There are moments, especially after we turn 60, when a staircase feels taller than it used to, when getting up from the armchair takes just a few more seconds, when walking across the room suddenly feels like crossing a field with wind pushing against your legs. These moments arrive slowly, like the quiet shift of seasons, and often we tell ourselves it's just age, just time. But what if it isn't only that? What if these changes are not signs of defeat, but signals from the body asking us to move, not harder, but wiser? Strong legs are not just for walking. They are your anchor. They are your way of reaching the garden, the kitchen, the bus stop, the bookshelf. Legs carry more than your weight. They carry your independence, your courage, your ability to say, I can still go. In Japan, a doctor named Shigeki Hinohara, who lived past 100, once said, "The legs are the last engine of the body. When they stop, it's as if the car is parked forever." He believed that the secret to staying young wasn't in a medicine or a miracle, but in the rhythm of our own movement, walking a little more each day, never allowing the engine to rust in place. And he wasn't alone. Dr. Peter Attia, a voice of modern medicine, echoes that same wisdom in different words. He says that the goal is not just to live longer, but to stay functional until the very end, to be able to stand, to carry a bag, to climb stairs, even at 80, even at 90. And that possibility? It begins in the legs. This isn't a video about exercises. It's about life. It's about what's quietly weakening your legs without you noticing, and what can be done, starting today, to rebuild strength. Even if your knees ache, even if you haven't moved much lately, even if you think it's too late. We'll talk about habits, small ones, ordinary ones, that can change how steady you feel, how confident. We'll talk about what you eat, about the first 10 minutes of your day, and we'll do it without miracle promises or pressure. Only truth, only possibilities. Because after all, legs that move are lives that move. And the road to your strength may not begin with a gym or a treatment. It may begin with a question. What if you could still trust your own steps? There's a habit that many people fall into without noticing. It happens just after waking up. The body is awake, but still. You drink your coffee, read a newspaper, maybe look out the window, and then sit. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10, but sometimes 40, 50 or more. The sun rises higher. The day begins around you, but your legs are still waiting. It seems harmless. After all, mornings are for quiet, for gentle routines. But staying seated for too long, especially right after waking, sends a message to your muscles. You won't be needed today. And slowly, the body listens. Muscles begin to lose tone. Balance fades. The strength that once carried you up hills or helped you rise without a second thought begins to slip away. Not suddenly, but gradually, like a book you meant to finish, but never picked up again. Science has tried to give a name to this. Morning stiffness, muscle atrophy. But you don't need terms to understand what you feel. That heaviness in the legs, that hesitation before standing, that quiet fear of falling. It isn't just aging, it's disuse. Muscles love to be woken up, and when they aren't, they forget. There's a woman, 68, living alone after her husband passed. She used to read each morning at the kitchen table, a peaceful ritual, but her balance began to change. One morning, almost without thinking, she stood by the counter instead. She leaned gently, holding her book. 3 weeks later, she noticed it. Her feet felt firmer, her knees less wobbly. She hadn't done anything grand. She simply stopped staying still. The legs are not machines. They are messengers. And when you begin your day sitting for too long, it's like opening your eyes but leaving the engine cold. A body that rests too long forgets how to rise. But one that alternates, 10 minutes seated, 10 minutes upright, 10 minutes walking gently from room to room, sends a different message. I'm here. I'm still useful. I still carry you. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be mindful. Because the morning isn't just the beginning of the day. It's the beginning of your strength. And your legs are listening. Some foods don't scream their effects. They whisper. They enter the body like comfort, like routine, like something we've trusted for decades. And yet over time, They slowly take away more than they give. For many, that food arrives every morning in the form of white bread, toast, or a soft bun warmed on the stove. It feels like tradition, but it may also be why the legs feel heavier, the ankles stiffer, and the calves weaker. Modern refined flours, especially those in white bread, are stripped of almost everything that once made them nourishing. They rush into the bloodstream, spiking sugar levels, then crashing them just as quickly. This silent roller coaster inflames the body from the inside out, and one of the places that suffers most is the circulation in the legs. The muscles that need good blood flow to rebuild and stay strong begin to starve quietly, and the result is rarely dramatic. It's subtle. You wake up sore. You notice more cramps. You lose the spring in your step. In places where people age with dignity, where men and women reach 90 still walking to market or tending their land, you won't often find white flour on their plates. In Okinawa, in the hills of Sardinia, in the villages of Nicoya, breakfast is simpler, slower. Often it's a bowl of whole grains, sometimes legumes, a warm soup, a leftover vegetable from the night before. They eat what strengthens, not just what fills. A man once said that breakfast is the first medicine of the day, and there's truth in that. Replacing the morning's refined bread with a small bowl of oatmeal, golden with turmeric, scattered with chia seeds, changes more than just your plate. Or perhaps a slice of sprouted grain toast topped with a drizzle of olive oil and a boiled egg. These aren't just foods. They are small acts of rebuilding, of choosing energy without inflammation, of choosing strength without noise. Because not all weakness comes from inactivity. Some of it begins with what we eat before the sun has fully risen, and what appears to give energy, the fast, soft, sweet foods, can, over time, quietly steal the firmness in your step. You may not notice it at first, but your legs do. They always do. There are rituals the body remembers, a way of preparing itself for the day that doesn't involve strain or exhaustion, but a kind of quiet awakening. And yet many people believe that movement only counts when it is intense. A walk around the block, a trip to the gym, a set of repetitions too demanding for a tired back or tender knee. So the smaller movements, the gentler ones, are forgotten. But it is often these that restore what we believe we've lost. Early in the day, our muscles are still asleep, especially the ones that hold us steady, the thighs that help us rise, the glutes that protect our lower back, the calves that catch us when we stumble. And when they remain inactive, the rest of the body overcompensates. The hips tighten, the ankles wobble. The posture collapses just a little, then, over time, a little more, until one day you find yourself reaching for furniture that used to be decorative. But something happens when you dedicate just 3 minutes, not to exercise, but to reawakening. Imagine starting the day with a slow lift of the knees, one at a time, while holding onto the back of a chair. The blood starts to move, the hips release. Then, a minute of rising from your chair without using your hands, not fast, not many, just enough to remind the legs of their duty. And finally, gentle heel lifts, up and down, grounding yourself again in the feet that have carried you so far. A man of 74 once said he felt dizzy every time he stood up. Then he began this small ritual. At first it seemed like nothing, but by the second week he noticed it. He stood taller. His legs felt steadier. The dizziness didn't vanish, but it softened, and that was enough. Enough to give him confidence again. Enough to leave the cane at home for one walk. We are not taught these things. No one tells us that stability can begin with a few mindful minutes. That strength is not always built through struggle. That the body doesn't need to be pushed, only woken up. This is not about performance. It's about presence. It's about greeting your legs in the morning the way you greet the sun through the window. Gently, patiently, with faith that they will carry you if you remember to ask. There is a kind of nourishment that has fed generations through war, winter, and work in the fields. It doesn't come in a bottle, it doesn't need a label, and it doesn't shout its value. But it builds something most of us don't realize we're losing: the strength in our legs. As the years pass, many people try to do what seems right. They add meat to their plate. They eat more chicken, more eggs, believing that this alone will preserve their muscles. But often, they overlook something gentler, something that has always been there: on the stove of an old kitchen, in the hands of a grandmother, in the soil of countries where people grow old with strength still in their stride. Lentils, quiet, humble, complete, rich in leucine, the very amino acid that tells your body it's time to rebuild. Packed with iron and zinc, they feed not only your muscles, but your energy. They require no chewing of tough meat, no fancy preparation, just a pot, some garlic, a drizzle of olive oil, and the patience of a slow simmer. In Okinawa, where some of the world's longest living people reside, legumes are eaten well into old age, not because they are trendy or prescribed, but because they are trusted. Beans, lentils, miso soups, these are foods that carry the memory of care. They sustain, they protect, they help the body do what it knows how to do, if given the right tools. Regenerate. A woman once said that she didn't believe in supplements, not because she doubted their science, but because she remembered the way her mother made lentil stew, slowly, lovingly, with bay leaves and turmeric. She began eating it again after her knees began to ache. Not every day, just 3 times a week. She didn't expect much, but over time, the stiffness eased. Her walk lengthened. Her body felt less like a burden and more like a companion. This is not magic. It is memory of a time when food was made to serve the body, not just the appetite. Lentils don't just fill your stomach. They rebuild the legs that hold your independence. They support the muscles that help you rise from a chair, step over a curb, reach the garden gate. And in a world where so much is fast and loud and fleeting, they remain simple, steady, and powerful in their quietness. There comes a moment, sometimes after a fall, sometimes after a quiet realization while tying a shoelace, when we begin to sense that the ground feels farther away than it used to. Rising from a chair becomes something we plan before we do. The body that once stood with ease begins to hesitate. It's not sudden, it's not dramatic. It's a quiet transformation, often unnoticed until we look back and wonder when exactly our legs stopped feeling like ours. But what if they never stopped being yours? What if they've simply been waiting for attention? There's a phrase, often repeated by Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, the Japanese physician who practiced medicine well past his 100th year. The youth is not in your face, it's in your legs. And those words carry more than poetry. They carry a truth we often forget. Because our legs are not just tools of movement, they are protectors of independence. They are the difference between watching life pass by from a window and choosing to walk out and meet it. As we grow older, we are often told to accept weakness as inevitable. We hear that balance will fade, that stairs will become harder, that falls will become more common. And so, in this subtle erosion of belief, we begin to shrink our lives to match our limits. Smaller steps, shorter walks, fewer outings. But what no one tells us is that much of this decline doesn't begin in the bones or the heart. It begins in the muscles we no longer use, the morning habits that make us still, the meals that seem harmless but chip away at our strength. Dr. Peter Attia, a voice of reason in modern aging medicine, speaks of a different future, one where we do not just hope to live long but to remain functional. Not functional in the clinical sense, but in the personal one. The function to carry our own groceries, to lift ourselves from the floor, to reach for something on a shelf without fear, to walk, unaided, into the later years of life. This vision is not built on medication or heroic effort. It is built on consistency, on care, and on the decision to value strength, especially in the legs, as one of life's most important treasures. Think of how your day begins, not in movement, but in stillness. The coffee cup, the armchair, the book, or the news. These are comforting rituals, but they often become traps. Without realizing it, we sit still at the very moment our muscles need a signal that they are still alive. The longer we remain seated, the more the body assumes it is no longer needed. Muscles that once supported us in silence begin to vanish in silence. But this can change. It doesn't take hours of exercise or special equipment. It takes awareness. A few intentional moments in the morning, standing instead of sitting, walking to the window, shifting weight from foot to foot, movements that remind the body, you are still needed. Then there is food. Not the grand meals, but the everyday habits we've carried for decades. The slice of white bread, the soft roll, the refined flour that arrives like comfort but leaves behind a trail of inflammation. These foods raise our blood sugar quickly, inflame the blood vessels, and interfere with the muscle's ability to recover and grow, especially in the legs, where circulation is already challenged with age. The calf muscles, the ones that keep us stable when we walk or stand from a chair, are particularly vulnerable. They are often the first to suffer and the last to be noticed. In the communities where people age with grace, the hills of Sardinia, the islands of Okinawa, the highlands of Costa Rica, morning food is not built on convenience. It is built on nourishment. Oats, legumes, root vegetables, foods that release energy slowly, that feed the body without inflaming it. One bowl of oatmeal with turmeric and chia seeds, or a simple slice of sprouted grain bread with olive oil and a boiled egg, does more than fill the stomach. It supports the muscles. It preserves the ability to move. And then there is something more subtle, the rituals of movement that many have forgotten. The idea that the body can be activated gently, that it can be reminded, not forced. A few minutes each morning of mindful motion, lifting the knees one at a time while holding the back of a chair, standing and sitting without the help of hands, raising and lowering the heels. Not to build muscle in the way a young athlete would, but to maintain the language of movement that the legs speak. This ritual tells the body, "I still trust you." And in return, the body begins to trust itself again. There is no miracle in lentils, yet they hold something precious. A kind of nourishment that has been forgotten in a world obsessed with supplements and powders. Lentils, rich in the very building blocks of muscle, offer something meat alone does not: ease of digestion, anti-inflammatory properties, and the wisdom of tradition. In Okinawa, lentils and beans are consumed not just as side dishes, but as main meals, seasoned with turmeric, garlic, and care. And they've supported strength not for years, but for lifetimes. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with something far better than advice. It leaves us with the quiet reassurance that strength is still possible, that even if your legs feel weak today, they are not finished, that even if your knees ache and your balance feels unsure, the path back is not closed, just overgrown with the vines of routine and neglect. To rebuild leg strength after 60 is not to chase youth, it is to protect freedom, to walk without fear of falling, to stand without asking for help, to live not in fear of decline, but in quiet confidence that your body, though older, still longs to serve you. And it will, if you listen, if you care, if you believe, not in miracles, but in moments. Because the legs that carried you through childhood, through work, through love and loss and everything in between have not forgotten how to move. They are waiting, not for perfection, not for a plan, just for the small signs of attention. And when they feel that, a few mindful steps, a warm meal made with purpose, a pause before sitting too long, they remember, and they rise.